Hello and welcome back after a bit of a hiatus to Ask Lovecraft After Dark. I am so incredibly honored to be able to come back to y'all with guest Derek Pearcy. Derek Pearcy is a creator of probably one of my most favorite games of all time, Illuminati New World Order with Steve Jackson Games. Derek is here tonight because he and his company are essentially taking some of the themes of Illuminati and bringing it to the screen, bringing it to computer, to iPad, to various other platforms with Illuminati Confirmed. So, Derek, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, I do have to really talk about just how much of a massive nerd I am for this game. So, like, this was the backup that I bought when I went to London and was separated from my real collection. This is half of it, by the way. And I had been playing this game for a long time. And since my brothers, who were about 10 years older than me, had the original plastic box. And, you know, we had that game for so long that the pink cards actually got sort of destroyed because the rubber band rotted around it. So they all got congealed together. But luckily, y'all came out with this baby for me. So when I say that I have a bit of an obsession with this franchise, with this particular IP, I have the credentials to back it up. And so
Absolutely.
let's talk about how you first got swallowed up by the Illuminati.
Well, I mean, very similar to your experience. I was a sophomore in high school, and someone, a friend of mine, had been given a copy of the game and didn't know what to do with it, but had seen me walking around, the furtive nerd that I was, with my little pocket box of Car Wars, and thought, oh, is that same company? Maybe you'd want this, and gave it to me. And that was the day everything changed.
Had he already cut out all the megabucks? Were they already, or were they still?
I got to do all that, and it was one of the things that I enjoyed so much about Steve Jackson Games early on was how they were very upfront about influences and other resources, and especially back in the day when the internet didn't exist, it was really nice to be able to say, oh, if I'm interested in things like in things like Car Wars, I can find out what the Road Warrior is. I wonder what that is. And which, as a sophomore in high school at the time, where VCRs were just becoming popular, was a bit of an eye-opener. The same thing with Illuminati, where they had here's a reading list, son, and I just checked everything off until I got through it, and kept going from there. And it became a real like a real pastime. I actually started a bulletin board system in the mid 80s with the intention of trying to create an online game of Illuminati that people could play, not knowing that there was already a play-by-mail game at the time.
So my brother had that. I once stumbled across a Foot Locker, which had his like play-by-mail like turn sheets and whatnot.
Oh, wow.
That was a treasure trove. Well, I likewise had to reverse engineer. I worked for a bookstore with the internet access, and when things were slow, I would log into this forum where people had mostly role playing, but I was like, I have all these Illuminati cards. I'm going to see if I can cobble together a online Illuminati, and I found the play-by-mail rules, and I sort of figured out how this would work in the forum system. And essentially, I acted as like the GM, and I had the other players, told them what their cards were and what they did, and essentially, facilitated. I'm pretty sure it was a fireable offense, but the statute of limitations has passed by this point. So there we go. Sorry to fine Canadian retailers everywhere for having burgled company time to run Illuminati games.
Well, it probably helped keep your attention at the job longer.
There you go.
Otherwise.
Now, were you into the Illuminati itself? Like, had you read the Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea books, or did that sort of come after?
So that came after it was good. The Illuminati game was my initial. I don't want to say inoculation, but it was the first dose of Illuminati that I got. And so then I of course found the the big fat bound book of all three of the Shea Wilson books, and slowly mowed through that with a bit of crazy sort of eye-opening, a third eye-opening. I actually just a few weeks ago found my old copy from when I was a kid, and I didn't realize how many pages I had put little like those little like those like plastic transparent glue markers you can put on pages to, oh, this. Oh my God, what the?
It's like a textbook,
So,
right?
yeah,
You've got to have the dividers in, and you've got to, make sure.
Exactly. And I was really meticulous about making sure they were evenly spaced and all that. It was just, I was into it. And then I read some of the other Wilson books, sort of peripherally Illuminati,
yes,
and then moved on from there. I was then sort of spun out of Illuminati land for a while until I was graduating. I met the Steve Jackson Games posse when I was a freshman at University of Texas at Austin, and they were trying to plan a new convention, a new game convention to start that was going to be in Austin, and I just volunteered to help, and that was fun, and they were an interesting crowd. And then when I graduated, I got offered a job there as a print buyer, basically managing like the actual physical production of the books and the games and all that, and took off from there, and eventually.
So when you joined, how big was Steve Jackson at this point? Because I mean, it was never like one of these sort of massive WotC style sort of companies. Like, I mean, it's always been sort of, at least it's given the impression of a kind of garage style business. But what was the sort of the status of it when you got involved?
And like 19, 21 people, something around there, I'd say. So small 2-story building, very humble but very fun, and we had fans and opportunity and everything we needed to be successful, and it was a great time to be at that place, for sure.
Now, did you show up before or after the federal government raid?
After.
Okay.
After. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine, was one of the, actually two friends of mine were targets of the Austin raid, and who I knew even before working at Steve Jackson Games. And when I started working there was when the EFF was first beginning to roll the case forward. It was about maybe a year and a half, I guess.
I mean, INWO is how I knew about the EFF, right? I mean, like because I was going through high school when suddenly I was introduced to this game. I want to say it was my brothers again, because they were being older than me, they introduced me to a lot of these games, and I think they're the ones who gave me a little packet of cards, and I ripped through, and I'm like, ooh, who's the L4 Society, and who is the Secret Masters of Fandom, and so it was that sort of direct homage, or at that point, or just sort of a thank you for sticking up for y'all.
That was absolutely a thank you, because there's no way that we would have gotten anything like compensation without the attention, the creation of and the attention of the EFF.
And the 90s, I mean, I heard a great interview where you guys were talking about the fact that, this came out during, sort of the big heyday of the collectible card game. The sort of Magic had exploded, but it was before the kind of the Pokemon takeover. You guys sort of were in this interesting sort of middle of the Cambrian era where you were seeing these sort of explosion of different games. There was the Star Trek and Star Wars and Magic the Gathering, and just like there were so many of these sort of proliferated games. What was that like to kind of be in the midst of that weird sort of, shocking and elbowing position?
Well, and I mean, Steve actually reminded me deeply of this just recently, that we were afraid that the peak had already passed, and that might be it. But I mean, we knew the people at WotC. Peter Atkinson had helped out with interviews for Pyramid Magazine, which I started just a few years before, and really like the sweetest people, most deserving of that kind of success, super happy for them. But we just didn't think it was going to keep going like it did. Or rather, there was no way of knowing. It was uncertain times. And
for younger viewers, this was also the era of Pogs and Beanie Babies. So you never know like what was going to necessarily keep going.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. There were very few models for things that had taken off and then just grown and stayed like that. Even Dungeons and Dragons had its ups and downs, and it was sort of the king in the industry at the time. TSR was, at least. And the fact that TSR took Watts' success so seriously, rushing out Spellfire, their first CCG, was really almost more validation of the business model than I think pouring water on it. But I don't think there's anything anyone could do to affect Magic the Gathering's trajectory at that point. They were set. They had struck something much more valuable than gold, and they were on that rocket, to mix metaphors. That was one. Steve has long expressed that was the reason why he didn't actually want to do Illuminati New World Order in the first place, was because he was simply afraid that we'd already missed it. The store shelves were already packed with point of purchase displays for a number of games. Like the first licensed products had just hit, and that's when we were like, oh, okay. And I forget which one was the one, I guess at Gen Con that year, that I went, oh, okay, well, that's it. It was like the first really slick competitors. There were some really kind of jive ones that came out where I was like, oh, that's great that, that's really cool that you did that. That's awesome. But this is not going to appeal to too many people, and maybe it's not a great game. But they started to look really pro fast. And so having a chance to jump in and do something very, very different from what all the other games were doing, which is essentially riffing on Magic the Gathering, and to have this was also right around the time that was it Rage, the werewolf game?
Oh, right.
The World of Darkness game.
There were a couple of them. Yeah.
Yeah. There was the vampire game and the werewolf game, but from the collaboration between WotC and White Wolf. But they and I think those were really the first multiplayer CCGs that I experienced. So, but Steve had already developed and had developed New World Order as a riff on the original Illuminati. So it was already built for that kind of multiplayer. Interaction. So it was nice to have that, to be able to kind of come out from left field during a time of where people were largely trying to sort of copy Magic with something that was just very different in theme and scale and style. And it really surprised a lot of people to our success.
Inwo is what sort of broke my Magic fever. I had been collecting Magic cards, and I had been, taking my Magic cards to summer camp and trying to get people to play. And I was on the verge of really diving head first. And then, Inwo showed up on my doorstep, and suddenly I was like, here's something I remember from, my childhood, the old card back, the old pink cards and whatnot. And then, but it was new and it was beautiful. The colors were great. The style of it was so different. And so in true sort of secret society fashion, we've been talking about this without actually telling anything about it. So I'm going to attempt to do a quick screen share for folks so that you can get an idea of just what on earth we've been talking about. So the Illuminati card game, you are playing a secret society. You are playing one of these sort of the masters, whether it's the Bavarian Illuminati itself, or the Discordians, or Society of Assassins, the Gnomes of Zurich, or these guys, the Servants of Cthulhu. And folks who've listened to this show long enough will have heard me talk about how this was the very first Lovecraft anything I ever knew about. Like before I knew about the books, before I knew about Lovecraft, I knew the name Cthulhu, but only because I knew about the Servants of Cthulhu. So that was it. And so in the game, you are, playing your master, trying to create this sort of org chart victory. By showing who you control. So you take over Russia, and then Russia takes over. I think in this case, I have them controlling Donald Trump. I don't know why I would have ever made that sort of decision. But at the same time, you're controlling video games and Republicans and Finland and the Boy Sprouts and Bjorne and all this, just massive web of influence, and you're attacking other people's, power structures, being like, all right, actually the Democrats have a really good chance to take over take over Japan because they've got a giant atomic monster. So we're going to try to take that over. And if we get Japan, we get all of Japan's puppets. It was just very weird and just enthusiastic. And the rules were so, can I say Baroque? Like there was so much to them. There was so much filigree. Like every time I sat down to play, I would be rediscovering things and realizing, oh no, we haven't been playing correctly. Because it was so intricate and so fun. And it was one of these things that you could just like pop open like a toy box and just get your hands inside and rediscover things each and every time. I was terrible at deck building. That was never my strength. I always just like forced everyone to play with like a giant, like, 100 card deck. Like, all right, we're going to play from this and see who manages to scrape a victory through. So that's the game as it was. Now in its new form, it's going in some interesting new directions, which I'm already seeing through some of the videos you released, some of the images you've released. So talk about this new life that is coming to the game and its sort of new permutation.
Yeah, well, thanks. So, I'll say first of all, I was lucky enough to have a large enough group of local friends that we could have a weekly Illuminati night at my place when it was still reasonable to get people together in the same place. And I'll say, like, even I'm almost embarrassed to say how many events of playing New World Order we were before I felt like we'd really kind of gotten to the firmament of what the rules really were. They kept this new stuff. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot you're supposed to, etc. And so that's it's a little embarrassing, but there we go. But having played a whole lot of different versions of Illuminati, a good number of times with generally the same, sort of rotating crew of people, a lot of things became really clear. First of all, it's still really, really fun, ultimately, and just the things you get to say, like I'm gonna. So the servants can say we're going to use Donald Trump to take over the Republicans, and that's maybe a little too on point. But the being able to say the CIA is going to use is going to use the convenience store to take over the cycle gangs and then attack the Boy Scouts or Sprouts rather. We do this stuff for Boy Scouts, other people. That was really engaging and fun. And the one thing I was just writing about this earlier on the Kickstarter. The one thing that when Steve and I were figuring out how we could do this together, this video game, his and this is really at the core of who Steve is, I think, as well. His strongest insistence really was that, like, no matter what we do, it has to be fun. As long as it's fun, like making something that's right or that's intellectually that sure, we can talk about that, but basically, if it's not fun, it's not worth to do. It's not worth doing. And so, and that made me feel so great because it both reminded me of the person I used to work with a long time ago, but it also I stayed friends with through the years, thankfully. But it spoke to my values today in terms of not necessarily just wanting to make something that that will just appeal to a specific group of people, or that will this just sort of crank to try and make money. But I'm lucky enough to be able to try and make the most fun Illuminati that I can. I gotta say, it's really the joy of my life outside of my family right now, and it really is. It feels like a real pinnacle of my professional career, because because I've always wanted an Illuminati video game, and I've always wanted to play more Illuminati, honestly. But I've also wanted it to be more accessible. I've wanted a lot of the general housekeeping and accounting and things like that to be more automated. I spent 20 years in Silicon Valley working on basically designing different kinds of cybersecurity solutions. And the one driving focus that that seemed to always help draw out what the right thing was to do was to consider the cognitive load of the person on the other side. You know, you're sitting in front of some kind of cybersecurity tool. You have a lot of data you can look at, and you have a lot of knobs and controls. Things aren't necessarily made by usability experts, and so the best you can manage the user's cognition and basically help draw their attention and help focus their attention on the things that are most important, will result in the happiest customers and the most successful operators. You know, my tagline for the longest time was make computers do computer things, let humans do human things, because there's a world of difference between the cognitive load that both of those forces can take. And so being able to apply something like that to Illuminati and say, there's a whole lot of stuff computers can do really well. Like, you shouldn't have to, like, the number of times that just a playtester hanging out with friends that I had to look around and go, wait, how many alignments has the Bermuda Triangle gathered yet? Or wait a second, how much power? Wait, no, they just played. Oh my! I already calculated. They just played that card. Did that double the power of all their corporate cards, or just that one corporate card? Oh my God! And that's and the numbers are not big that you're dealing with, right? We're not doing complex math. We're not really multiplying anything. But the truth is that human beings have vastly more, well, speaking for myself at least, vastly more narrow limits to their cognition than we typically think. We can only hold a certain number of numbers in our head at a time. And then you can practice at it and get better, but there are limits. Most people have smaller limits than we think. And the all of the, okay, so if I say there's a 4 power and 2 resistance, and then this person chipped in with this 3, and they're against it, and then we get to start, someone plays a disaster instant attack, so we take a break and we run the disaster and then see how that goes, and then we come back and I'm like, okay, 4 power, and you have to do it all over again. And through observation, we quickly determined that was, so besides people just looking at their cards and thinking, what do I really want to do? That was the single greatest factor to extending game time. And Illuminati has historically been a very long game to play. It certainly can be a longer game to play. Now, time passes. The other thing we discovered is time passes very quickly while you're playing Illuminati. And that's also a great sign. It's a lovely game. It's fantastic. But it didn't take long before people were kind of looking at each other and saying, oh, well, wouldn't it be cool if a computer was tracking all this stuff for us? So it really gave me the strong desire to roll up my sleeves and see how easy we could make it to play how fun of a game of Illuminati.
And I have to say, the rollout for your Kickstarter was incredibly professional. Like, I began to hear word of mouth. Just, I think I heard from Ken Haidt, who's been on this show, who's doing some writing work. And so as soon as I knew he was involved, like my ears immediately pricked up. Like, okay, so this isn't just like some sort of IP cash grab. Like, there is an actual, if folks are getting Ken involved, I know immediately to begin salivating. But beyond that, you guys had, you were setting up these sort of interesting, conspiracy style like images that you were throwing out there. There was a nice vaporwave quality, lots of moves. I was very into that. And then by the time it actually launched, you had, you had this great design set up. I was blown away by the art. I mean, this is a game series that has some great art. I mean, from the very like minimalistic, sort of clip art style of the original game to, the incredibly colorful, incredibly beautiful designs from the 90s game, which you guys wound up you guys had to like create whole new technologies, or at least sort of explore whole new graphics technologies, to get that done, to this, which, where you've got dynamic backgrounds, you've got cards that are going to be changing based on the alignment, based on their abilities. Like, that sounds a little bonkers, but very much in keeping with that desire to not only have a fun game, to not only have a bizarre game, but to have a beautiful game. And so, yeah, let's talk about how that journey has been.
Well, it's been interesting. So the original idea was that I got my hands on a copy of my favorite but my least played Illuminati expansion set 3 by Alan Varney, who did such a great job on it. Can't believe it really changed my first. It kind of blew my little brain. I think I was a senior in high school when I got that, and it basically creates this power wheel where you can do various things to increase overall the power of one alignment or another across all of the cards. So it's essentially what Steve ended up very cleverly taking and sort of formalizing into clusters, which were the New World Orders in Illuminati New World Order.
Yeah.
So you can say, oh, there's, don't forget to smash the state. Well, all of the government cards just lost one power or whatever. I forget the details off the top of my head. But
no, those were fantastic, and the ways they sort of like stacked and interlaced with each other, they could destroy a game, right? If you if you created like world hunger and then political correctness, suddenly like, oh no.
Exactly, and it was just that much more fascinating and delightful. And so that was also where they went beyond the simple orbital mind control lasers and actually let you really do crazy stuff very easily with alignments. And there was I think they re-released the expansion later on and called it Brainwash, because there was, instead of simply attacking to control or neutralize or destroy, you could brainwash and flip an alignment. So, but the frustrating thing with that is then again, sort of like with New World Order, then once something changes, then it changes so much about how you perceive that card, and it was always a bit of a mess to try and remember that, and then you put sometimes depending on how many alignments were on the card, you put a little piece of cardboard that they gave you on there to say, oh, it's conservative now instead of liberal. Maybe it was also covering a different alignment, and you had to put it up at the top. So then it was, again, a lot of cognition required to repeatedly refresh your context of what the situation is.
I won't lie. I think any card that required a token always kind of got put to the back of my hand.
Yeah,
anytime it's like, and be sure to attach this. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I don't have I don't have tokens near me.
Yeah, no. I absolve you of any concern about that, because you are not alone. But being able to iterate over this art and create some art that sort of permutates has been really delightful. The one concern that I had going into it, and it's been about 40% proven, is that people it's the kind of thing that people aren't really seeing the value of, I think, until they experience it. It's sort of like I remember how people talked about like GUIs when command lines were still sort of prevalent. All these, the older grognards going, why would I can just type it in, and I'm a command line guy. I keep terminal up and I do things, but oh man, I don't think anyone can say that the GUI was a bad idea. I'm not saying this is like going from a command line to a GUI, but so it's a distant analogy, but I think it is the kind of thing that people will find super delightful when they do see it. We're just, because the people's hunger for the game itself to just work is so much greater than their interest in the dynamic art. We've had to sort of flip our schedules around. And if we end up getting funded, actually, we should be able to have dynamic art out at some point before the end of next year. But first, we're going to ship the version of the game that has, we're going to basically, because, in order to do Illuminati, you have to do like basic Illuminati. And then in order to do the Illuminati Confirmed that we want to do based on NWO, we have to kind of do a lot of NWO. Steve was kind enough to find the backup that I made of the NWO project when I did it. And I had passed Derek, organized everything super nicely. So I have the nicest resolution graphics that you're ever going to find from these cards. We're not scanning card art, we're using the bits that were used to make the cards. So we can actually put out something like NWO in this framework.
Now, for the longest time, it felt like if you wanted to find anything about NWO or Illuminati online, you had to go to, and I remember Steve Jackson Games literally linked to it. Was it the Carnegie Mellon website or like University of Pittsburgh? There was some like college website that you had to like go into. And
they were, and they were all in on it too. Yeah.
It felt like, it felt like being in a secret society. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like being into this game and like hunting stuff down. When I discovered how into it the Germans were and how they were like all these like German cards for everything. My favorite thing I learned about was people who would mix and match German English decks, but make sure to have registered trademark so they could play registered trademarks on these awful compound German words that then everyone would have to say perfectly, or else sacrifice plot cards. Yeah, there was a card in this game where it's called registered trademark. You plop it on a card, and anytime someone refers to it, they have to say the full name, which also worked really well with the Subgenius expansion, the supersonic aluminum space Nazis from hell, or from the center of Earth, whatever it was. See, I would be punished now because I didn't know the name exactly.
Well, that's hysterical. I actually worked on the German cards for the German New World Order. We had to go through. They had about like 12 or 15 custom cards, because of course they don't know who Republicans are, and I had to go through and pre-Euro turn all of the green money blue.
Oh, of course.
When I was just so delighted that anyone cared enough that they would want to do it, that I just knocked it out. It was fun. It was really one of that whole period was one of the happiest sort of work experiences in my life. It was a terrific payoff for throwing an enormous amount of faith into a gigantic project that I didn't know I could do.
Has the sort of, it's been, 20 years since NWO, well, 25 years or so since NWO, and about 35 since the original Illuminati. Like, our culture's relationship to conspiracy theories has really shifted a lot in that time. Like, with me growing up, there was a kind of like sense of like, oh, this is a fun kind of fairly harmless thing you can kind of like look into. And now we're like, oh, there's congressional hearings about Facebook being broken up because they have become like a massive misinformation thing. And like, we have a whole generation that, is not going to take a vaccine because of a Minion meme. So in light of that, what, has that changed how you've had to approach this kind of like, oh, this is sort of like fun and harmless, and there's something a bit kind of, there's a bit more of a dicier territory where we're navigating now.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's true. The Illuminati have gotten more heavy-handed over the years in how they're manipulating us. But yes, while again, the original Illuminati and New World Order were both hysterical and dark. And actually, as like I said earlier, I actually learned a whole lot about the real world from Illuminati cards and the parodies and congressional wives. Why congressional wives? And I looked into the whole Watergate situation. Like, oh my God, that poor lady, that guy's wife. But that's a real thing. et cetera, et cetera. It turns out there aren't really goldfish fanciers, the way the game keeps saying. But I mean, I'm sure there are, but it's not like that big of a deal.
I was about to make a goldfish fancier joke, which suggests that the orbital mind control lasers are at work. So I'll just say that you taught a generation of Americans who Vladimir Zernovsky is, and like I'm still trying to figure out why. So
he came in the Assassins expansion, right?
I believe so. It's just a pile of boxes now. Like I have no idea what's from which expansion and where from where. Like it's just like the only ones I know are different are the Subgenius ones because slightly different art, and also it's the Subgenius.
There you go. It's its own thing. It's too bad that they don't have a license to that anymore. A lot of people just saying it would be so cool if you could bring some of the slot cards in, but oh well. I never actually played that version, so. What were we just talking about? There was something.
Vladimir Zernovsky, like on every other chat show out there.
Yeah. But in terms of things that I don't want to touch, I've been very careful to make sure that we're sort of punching up instead of punching down, because that's very important to me. And if it feels more like we're punching down, then I at least want it to be people I think deserve it. And that's a terrible thing to say, but for example, I don't have a lot in common with anti-vaxxers in terms of the perspective. And if making some light fun of anti-vaxxers disappoints them, and if that feels like punching down, then I'm really sorry. But we must agree to disagree at best. So, but it's been great to update and uplift a lot of these cards, and it's been really interesting seeing how much American society has changed since 1990. From the mid 90s. It's not just that we don't have Bill Clinton running things anymore. It's that, coming up on 25 plus years later, I'll say most places in America, hopefully almost every place in America, it shouldn't turn anyone's head for someone to say that they're gay. I mean, no one should really look at someone anymore and say, hey, I bet that person's gay. Like, who cares? Doesn't matter. And being able to see, like, from the early 80s, I think there was a gay activist card where they were, where it was a very, 80s stereotypical pre-AIDS image, and they were weird. And I said, well, I can't exactly say that they're straight because that would send the wrong signal, but it's not weird to be gay anymore. LGBTQ activists, which is now a card, they're not weird because they're not. Now you can make them weird, and that's weird. But I'll send you some of the images that we did for those. What's even funnier is when you make them straight. So basically it's a bunch of people dancing like marching in a parade, and they just have this, like, Ivy League prep uniforms on.
The log cabin Republicans, or the corporate sponsored pride marches. Yeah, no, I mean that's what as someone who played this game for so long, when I heard there was going to be changeable alignments, I was like, what? No, how can that be? And then when I saw how you guys were playing with it, when it's you had the televangelist and you had the police and like the different uniforms and the different sort of, like, I was like, okay, like this gets at something you can't do. It's something you cannot do at all in a physical card game, is literally change the art. But also it allows you to have a more kind of complex system and recognize that things are not just sort of locked into place. And there are sort of different variants of all these different organizations out there. Very excited for what Weird Dentists looks like, just so you know. Really, I'm really excited.
Oh, yeah. No, that there's some of the, it's funny, the versions of the cards that consist, like every single time, I hope I'm not spoiling a joke by saying that it's the same joke every time. Is Fanatic. We keep, like, me and the people I work with here, Solario, the product manager and our director, we go through these riffs of like coming up, okay, well, so what does a violent social network look like, right? And you have to consider it not just in the context of making it violent, but what if it was also weird and conservative, because you want these things not to overlap each other, so that you can actually have permutations, not simply just total shifts of alignment. So then we were thinking about oh my God, what was the card I was just talking about before that? Or maybe I forgot. Oh, the permutations and
there was the sort of the LGBT activists. I mentioned dentists because I like dentists.
Yeah. Oh, right. Well, just for Fanatic. Whenever we would get to Fanatic, we would always try and come up with something new. And every time it was just, we would have the figures would just turn to the camera and go, and it was funny every time. We would literally laugh just thinking because it was when we would do last. We get all the way through. So we already had them fixed in our heads. And when these characters would turn to the camera and break the fourth wall and bug-eyed stare at us, we'd crack each other up. It's a winner. So I really hope we get a chance to blow that up. But it's part of, so like changes that we made to Illuminati. We try to be smart about it, but we essentially have the numbers. So you're just not dealing with larger numbers anyway. Instead of the highest power you can have being 10, it's now 5. And it's, so everything's scaled down a little bit so that it makes it easier to just eyeball a couple of options and see what might be a good idea, instead of just having to do, again, and people say, oh, it's only slightly more complex math, but it really does add up, both in terms of time and cognition. And we're trying to represent the power and a resistance as a number of pips. So you can visually take them in instead of having to necessarily even think about the numbers in the first place, which turns out to be less important. But when you get into situations where you're in the middle of doing something big, and you'll have bursts where I have 8 power actually, because it's way off the scale. It's like an Illuminati, you could end up with 18 and 24 power. It's great to be able to then use that last pip to just put a number in, so we don't have to worry about exploding the scale. But then you can tell immediately what's going on. Or to have negatives. If you've taken someone's resistance all the way down, it's like -7 resistance. I think I've got this one. But and also to represent multiple action tokens that way as well, because sometimes you can accrue action tokens, and I thought, well, what if it was like a triangle and you can only have 3, and then they light up? But then, well, if you only rarely ever have them, then why do you have the other 2 sockets always showing? And that's just a distraction, etc. But then by the time and then we were thinking, well, and then the alignments are great, because so that's on me that the alignments weren't always alphabetized when they showed up on the card. That was a bad call. But the fact that you can hopefully well enough sort of iconify the alignments and ensure that they're always in the same place on the card in the appropriate color, should make it just immediately obvious what a card has anyway. So, and I thought, well, that's just great. And then it was a very natural step to go, well, if you just redo the card, what if if I made the local police corporate, would they be mall cops? Is that basically it? Or if you made them government, would they be like all armored and military like cops are? No. And not cops, I'm just saying it's a thing that's happened. And that really, Jim, exactly to your point, that really opened up to me another way to look at what it was possible to do with the game, and what it was possible to help people think about in putting all the opportunities that these blocks create together.
Well, and the replayability suddenly just explodes, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
like, oh, I've only ever seen the weird version of this card. Now I'm seeing the straight version of it. I've only ever seen the sort of the liberal government version, and here's the kind of conservative corporate version. Like, there's all sorts of, like, just my mind boggles. I'm really, really excited for this. Oh, so we obviously you're in the middle of the Kickstarter, which is its own sort of time-consuming thing. Where in kind of, I guess, design and sort of implementation are you? Is that kind of having to take a pause until you sort of see what happens with the Kickstarter, or are you guys just sort of barreling through to see?
I'm kind of barreling through. Actually, I planned on taking a couple of weeks off after the Kickstarter, no matter what. But now I'm not. I'm actually really energized by the Kickstarter, and I've actually handing off some of the things I plan to do so that I can go deep down into the coding. I've made several proofs of concept. I'm much more of I don't want to irritate anyone by saying I'm much more of like an Objective-C iOS programmer than I am like a C++ or C# programmer. I just find it so much easier to do, just more experience. So I've kind of gone back and forth between prototyping some of the structures and some of the the approach for the game engine specifically, and how we would track state with all of these different cards, with all of these different modifiers and permutations and combinations, which can then be removed in the middle of a turn and then has to be recalculated. It was just much easier for me to explore those ideas in Objective-C, which of course I can't really spit directly out to Unreal Engine because, well, how we want to deliver the game cross-platform. So now I'm going back into Unreal Engine and starting to sort of set all my silverware out on the table now, and then begin cooking the real meal. If that's a feasible analogy, I'm not sure.
There we go. Well, that sounds fantastic. Thank you so much. I guess what should folks be on the lookout for as far as this particular project, and anything down the line?
Well, really, we're about we're just a little bit over a third of the way through our Kickstarter right now, and we're about a third of the way through our backing. We would love to be able to share this with more people. I think I'm a terrible self-promoter, but I think this is going to be a great game. Not because I came up with it, but because Steve came up with it, and I have more faith in him than me at this point in terms of game design. He's been super helpful and been weighing in every step along the way, and he's only been invaluable, and it's been a real treasure to be able to go back to that part of my career and work with him again. Find our Kickstarter. Illuminati Confirmed is the full name. And if you like it at all, please back it, because we really use your help bringing this game into existence. And it's going to be fun to play. It's going to take something very complicated to make it really fun.
Well, fantastic. Derek, thank you so much for coming on the show, talking about this game. I'm really excited. I really am going to also encourage folks to go check it out. It is, again, it's worth seeing just for the art alone. But the gameplay, if it's anything like its forebears, is going to just take over our devices. And not to be all conspiratorial minded, but just think about it. Here we have a guy who went into cybersecurity and then came out of that to create a game right as all of this is going out in 2020 to get on all of our devices, to get all in front of everyone. Just think about it. If there's a grand conspiracy to take over the world, you want to be on the ground floor. You want to be backing that.
You see through my onion skin charade.
Well, thank you so much. This has been Ask Lovecraft After Dark, sister program to Ask Lovecraft. Folks who aren't aware of this show can go to asklovecraft.com, where you can find my regular program where I impersonate H.P. Lovecraft, offering up questionable advice to the world at large. You can also find us on Twitter, on Tumblr. You can find me personally on Twitter at Lehman Kessler. If you really enjoy the program, and after, of course, you've gone to support this Kickstarter, you can go to patreon.com/asklovecraft and see more content like this. Derek, where can folks find you?
You can find me at Derek at RadioFree.net or IlluminatiConfirmed.net.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much. Have a wonderful night and be well. Fnord.
Thank you.